Fáilte Harnash go dtí sreatha cúig de chórála Tomás I gcóir le airgrid. Ag caint crack agus cad le íana speisialta gach seachtain. Buin súpas.
I remember saying to him, "This is some trip, Sean Murray. This is unbelievable." He says, "It's not a trip, Muggsy. It's a tour." And I was like, "No, but you know what I mean?" He says, "No, I don't."
Proud there again, D&G. Who're there again, D&G. Dalshin Cabana. Yeah, to LNG anyway. Larry and Galvin anyway. That's the brand name anyway.
Tá an seo ag taithúibh an séasúr seo ag airgrid. Tá airgrid ag stúra angach leicteachas na héireann chuig todhchaí íseal chearbóin. And we're back for episode 6 of season 5 of Chórála Tomás in association with Airgrid. Airgrid are the official timing partner of the GAA since 2015. Tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by former Dublin GAA All-Ireland winner and manager, the great Tommy Carr. Tommy, tá fáilte rót.
Thanks very much, Tomás. Good to be here.
I suppose we're obviously recording this to go out during the week, and one of the big news of the day, Tom, is that Mickey Harte has left Derry. I don't know, did you hear it? And it was always a tough one. It was always a tough one because of, I suppose, it'd be aching to yourself going in managing Meath or me getting involved with Cork. That is the relationship that Tyrone and Derry have. But he's gone after a year. What do you make of that?
Well, I suppose I'd ask myself the question, what did I make of him leaving Louth to go to Derry in the first place? And I think, and being as sensitive as possible, if there wasn't circumstances that Mickey had undertaken years previous, people would have been very hard on him to do that. I think it was a big decision. He had, and let's nail this thing about contracts in the GAA. People go on about he had a contract with Louth. He didn't have a contract with Louth. There are no contracts in the GAA. There are agreements. So, but an agreement is somebody's word. So my feeling in the first place that he probably cut them a bit short by leaving and going to maybe what he thought was going to be an All-Ireland winning team, because we all kind of thought that it was possibly an All-Ireland winning team. I think he probably would have got a little bit of, jib over that over the years, and he does appear impervious to criticism and media coverage, but nobody is totally impervious at the end of the day. When you put your head down on the pillow at night, those things do go around in your head. So I think how flat Derry went then after the league probably snowballed a bit. I don't know, maybe he got a bit frustrated, maybe players got a bit frustrated, but he obviously came to the decision for whatever reason that this is just not working out, either for him personally or he feels it's just not working out as a liaison between himself and the Derry football team.
Yeah, it is. Tis either one of two things, Tom. Tis either he was gently nudged towards it or it was a personal decision. But I think there was something not right, the way the wheels fell off for Derry during the season, and particularly how well they did last year and should have beaten Kerry in an All-Ireland semi-final. People were expecting Derry possibly to take that extra step, and in spectacular fashion, I didn't see that coming. No. After winning the league, somewhere between the league and the start of the championship, geez, it went completely wrong, didn't it?
Well, I think one of the reasons, probably the main reason, and as you know, Tomás, you have to be in the change room to really know everything, to be pretty factual on something. But over time, you gain an experience and you read the signs that are there. For me, one of the biggest reasons was the continuation of playing by Conor Glass and co. from club championship straight into league football. I just felt all the time, because it's so high intensity to inter-county level, they were going to get tired. And even to the degree, and maybe those players went to Mickey and said, "No, Mickey, we want to play, it's our county," etc., etc., etc. But my feeling is that him or his conditioning team should have taken control of the situation, say, no, these guys need a break. They need a 4 to 6 week break or a 2-month break, totally away from football, and that wasn't the case. And when it starts to slide at all, when a little bit like that goes, it is really difficult to pull it back. And they would be influential players in a panel. Now, I might be totally wrong as to why it happened, but you're right. I agree. They should have beaten Kerry last year. And maybe everybody felt, well, Mickey Harte might be the defining thing. That doesn't always work out either. And there has to be I always think there has to be a gel between, there's loads of outside managers you can get in, and this fella's a great reputation, so-so's a great reputation. And Joe Kernan kind of struggled outside of Armagh as well when he went to Galway. And I had my own challenges when I went to other counties, and everybody does. But there has to be a gel. There has to be something that makes it work. And for whatever reason, it just ended up not working. Whatever went sour.
Yeah, it's managing in general, Tom. And you had Dublin, obviously, which was probably the biggest of all. And you had Roscommon, you had Cavan, and you were involved with Wexford, I'd say, for a while on another level. But it is, I've been involved in just a lower level, under 20, but the commitment is insane. You look at the managers hurling football right now, it is a full-time job. And the standards in terms of S&C, in terms of the video analysis work that's done in the background, the social side of it, every single thing I think has increased in time in the last 15 to 20 years. And not taking away from it was always a huge job and always time consuming. But do you think it's gone too far?
No, but Tomás, think about this, and you know this better than I do because you're involved with the media now and you're following much closer than I'm following in terms of detail. How many of them are not full-time? Like Mickey Harte was full-time. Jim Gavin was more or less full-time. John Kiley, I understand, is more or less full-time.
Jack O'Connor is full-time.
Jack O'Connor is full-time. They're all full-time now.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can kind of use, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. It's not that these guys are running businesses or holding jobs down. They've all taken steps to free themselves up. And they also have a team around them who are also more or less full-time. Right? The conditioning teams, strength and conditioning teams now are full-time. Various people doing the video analysis, it's their full-time job. So that has raised the bar significantly. Now, whether it has raised it in terms of the standard of football, I'm not so sure. And the standard of coaching, I'm not so sure. But in terms of the time element, and when you say, has it gone too far? Like when you say that, Tomás, what are the elements that occur to you that make you say, right, we're gone too far? What do you see? What do you see that says to you, no, this is not right. This is not the way the GAA is meant to be?
What I see is if you have people like you see Pat Ryan from Cork, you see Pádraig Joyce from Galway who have jobs, and obviously there's a level of understanding between their employer and what they're doing while they're coaching. But my understanding of it and my experience of it, Tom, would be that nobody actually sees where the suffering is, but something is suffering because of the amount of time. There's no way a guy can do a normal job. And I know I take it that there are a percentage of lads who are coaching full-time and managing full-time and have nothing else on the side. But then there is also a percentage of lads that are and that have families and that are young. And I do think we don't see it, but somewhere something is suffering, whether it's your private job or whether it's the coaching or it's, I just think that there's so much time. You mentioned it there, the S&Cs, they're all the analysis lads, the coaches, so much time goes into it the days you're not even training that it is a full-time job, yet we're holding down other jobs also.
Yeah, but when you take on a job like managing an inter-county team, everything suffers. Yeah. And not just everything suffers. Your job, you've got to position yourself in your job. And nobody will tell me that they're managing a team and doing a really good job in a professional job at any stage. Nobody will tell me that I'm spending loads of time with my family and my kids when you're in a full-time football or hurling management job. You're not. And therefore, it's not just the setup that's around you, it's your personal circumstances. And I would say, because of what it is now, a lot of potentially good managers and coaches, etc., are not getting involved at this level because they simply can't. They got to earn the bread and the butter. So it is very difficult to marry the two. You can't marry the two; it's not happening. And that's why, if you look at most counties, there are elements of them all who are do nothing else but this.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's.
And even Tomás, even from the point of view of players, like players, there's no doubt players are they're not selling themselves short. How would I put it? They are borrowing time or taking time from their daily lives. And when I say daily lives, their jobs. I mean, I see them here and they're leaving early, and yeah, and there's companies that will accept that, but there's a lot of large companies out there who have absolutely no time for it whatsoever, and they want their pound of flesh in the office or whatever they're doing. And that's what makes it difficult. But we all have to ask ourselves the question, and it's no more than the rules and all that. Where do we want this to go? What do we want it to look like in 10 years' time? What do we want the GA to be in 20 years' time? And I'm not sure we take a strategic view like that in terms of the playing, the operation side of it, the club side of it. Clubs are suffering. Everything is suffering. I actually think, over the years, we get all these big games. We get Dublin, Kerry, and we get Kilkenny and Clare and Tyrone and Armagh. And what they do is paper over a lot of the cracks in the GA, and we hobble from great game to great game. But there are a lot of cracks out there. There's a lot of unearthing to be done to address all the issues in the GA.
Geez, the calendar is obviously one I don't think, Tom, they'll ever get right. The game of football itself. Are you happy that these men, the committee that's coming, are going to give us, hopefully, a set of rules that will in some way alleviate the difficulty we have in watching games at the moment?
Tomás, I think why I was let go from RT, or I wasn't continued with RT, because about 3 years ago, I made the comment I wouldn't be sitting here if I wasn't working at it. It's so boring.
Yeah.
So football, 80% of it would bore you to tears. And that's not me. And of course, he's a dinosaur. He's this, he's that. I'm not. I've kept with football. I had the Westmeath Miners. I'm working with my local club. So I've kept in tune with football, and I've been involved with it all the time. And again, did co-comments and commentaries for 20 years and 25 years. It's not old fuddy-duddy stuff. It's not dinosaur stuff. So I just wonder, Tomás, what are the terms of reference that Jim Gavin and his group have been given? What is their job? What is the job to be done? Is it to make it look better? Is it to entertain better? Is it to get more participation? Is it to address? What is it? What exactly is it going to address? There are a few easy wins in this, because before you know what to address, you've got to say, well, what are the actual problems? Now, the problems are when you see these teams coming out to the 40, 50 metre line of the opposition, throwing the ball over around the back in a loop. And anytime you see a guy who makes a dash 40, 50 yards solo and stops, nobody in front of him, turns back and passes it back, that's a problem with a game. That's a game that has slipped away compared to what it was. Like, what's Gaelic football meant to be? It's meant to be a rough and tumble. It's meant to be a physical game. It's meant to be helter-skelter, but it's not now. It's like soccer. It's a possession game. Gaelic football is a possession game. So do we want it to continue to be a possession game, or do we want it to go back a bit to being helter-skelter? And we need to understand what we want out of this group.
Yeah, I think we probably have good lads involved in it who understand the game, and I do think from listening it, and I haven't really focused too much into it, they do want to give the benefit to the team who are attacking. And I think you put your finger on it there in terms of teams and players. I watched the minor game, the minor All-Ireland final between Derry and Armagh. Some unbelievably talented players, but at a very, very careful, measured, defensive, I suppose, match to watch. Who do you think, Tom, will win the All-Ireland this year? The last 4 that are left. You've Donegal, you've Kerry, you've Galway, and you have Armagh.
If you asked me just before this weekend, I would have said Dublin, and that's
everybody would have said it.
Yeah, and that's not being, that's not being,
parochial.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's just I thought they had the footballers and that they would, and then I'm going to start by saying, I'm sorry about this, but I don't think Kerry are going to win it. Don't ask me why. And sometimes you just get a feeling about a team. It's not that you can say, oh, they don't have the forward. They do. They have the best forward in the country, the best forward I've seen play football, and David Clifford. So they do. But there's something that they leave themselves in a lot of games exposed to being beaten, like the Derry game last year. But Derry couldn't step in and finish it.
Yeah,
and I just think that, I don't know, and not because you're doing this podcast, but nobody admires Kerry and Kerry football more than I do. I grew up with my father talking about it. My father loved Mick O'Connell. He used to be the caretaker in Thurles CBS, and Mick O'Connell used to come up and do a bit of coaching and that kind of thing. So he idolised Mick O'Connell. The great man was with us today, he'd say. But sorry, to go back to your question. I think Galway can win it if they have Comer, Walsh, and McDade is there now, but Comer and Walsh on the pitch, and if they have all their players at the right time, as uninjured as possible, I think they're capable of winning it. I don't think Armagh will, and I don't think Donegal will. For me, it's a Galway-Kerry thing, and if Galway can get it right, I think they can win it.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's. I'd obviously make an argument for Kerry. I don't know, is it a personal thing or what? But if they can get that forward line clicking a little bit more, but I think it's set up for the northern teams then for everybody else to kind of hope maybe and think that Galway and Kerry will get through. Can I bring you back, Tom? I found it fascinating always. The huge connection with Tipperary and then Dublin. You had a brother, Declan, who obviously played with Tipperary hurlers, captained them to an All-Ireland. You captained Dublin. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's probably a good pub question. Somebody said to me, my mother and father were from Tipperary. So I had 2 sisters. They lived down there. For economic reasons, he had to sell off what was on the farm, move up to Dublin in 1960, whereupon myself and Declan were born. And then in 1980, the pull of the land came along to Dad again, and he moved back down to Tipperary. Now, in 1980, I went into the army as a cadet, so I never went back to Tipperary. And Declan ended up doing 2 years of school in Thurles CBS, so he took to the hurling while he was down there.
Yeah.
So that's how I then went back up to Dublin when I was stationed, when I came out of cadet school. Declan stayed in Tipperary, obviously. So I was mad to play football for Dublin. That's all I ever wanted to do. And talk about sacrifice. I was doing a commerce degree, if it was called commerce degree, in Galway at the time, and it was taking too much of my time that I couldn't play enough football. And I slipped back to an arts degree so I could concentrate on football for the 2nd and 3rd year. So that was kind of my madness for football. So that's how we came to be the Dublin and the Tipperary connection.
It is a pub question. 'Tis fascinating, actually, that both of you captained. Not only, you'd say something if it was the same code, but different codes also.
Yeah, different.
Would you have played hurling as well, Tom?
I did. I played hurling with Holy Cross, John Doyle country. And I actually played football, Tomás, for Tipperary for 2 years. And I always tell everybody anyway that I marked Jack Ó'Sé in a McGrath Cup or the first round of the Munster Championship or something. I think I did for half an hour before the Tipperary selectors got sense and gave me a break. Yeah.
You joined the Army, Tom. I'll give you a funny story in a second, but was there anything behind? Was it just an general interest in the Army, because they would have put you through college then in UCG? Wasn't that the way it worked when you went to the cadets? Did you enjoy the Army life and that side of it, like in terms of what it brought your sport?
I did, yeah. Part of the reason, Tomás, I got the army was, and I was mad to do the army, but I didn't get the guards and I didn't get the civil service. And in those days, you got teaching, you got the civil service, you got the guards, or you became a priest. And I
Yeah.
certainly wasn't going to become a priest. So the army was kind of the one where I was successful, and I went into it. And in those days, you're talking, I was 18, 19 years of age and didn't know my arse from my elbow, to be quite honest with you. And it's a really young age to go into something like that. And I struggled with it for the first 6 months, to be honest.
Yeah.
I struggled with the whole away from home and the homesickness of it, and the difficulty, because it's tough. It is tough going.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But I loved the lifestyle. I really enjoyed going out to South Lebanon. I had two tours of duty in South Lebanon, and worked out there for a period of time. And it's like training, Tomás. It's the difficulty with the army is it's like a football team training, but never getting to play the championship. So the army trains, and unless you go out to the south, out to Lebanon or out to Rwanda or out to some of these countries, you're never really putting into practice what you're being trained for. And the army does struggle with that a little bit in terms of the boredom then if you're not doing those things.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny one. While I'm here now, I'm only after thinking of it. My own parents, I suppose for some reason or another, we were infatuated with football, and they wouldn't have known really how we were getting on in terms of study and all that. So we, not behind our backs, they would have told us that they were applying for the army and applying for the cadets and applying for the ESB. That's how Dara got into the ESB originally. Yeah. But I went for a cadets interview down in Collins Barracks down in Cork, and my dad put a pile of effort into it, and he got a local guy who had been in the army to sit down and chat with me. So we travelled that time, I suppose. It was a long old drive down to Cork, 2.5 hours. I went in, Tom. There was 4 officers sitting at a table. There was one lady on the right-hand side. I'll always remember it. Walked in, and the interview was going great. And the next thing, I was asked a question, what impact, Mo Molan was just after going into the North. And I was asked a question, true story this now, I was asked a question, what impact do you think Mo Molan will have on the North? And I said, Jesus, I think he's doing a great job above there. So I, in fairness to the lady on the right-hand side, she smirked, and I says, whoa, I'm after doing something now. So I came out, I went out to my dad, he was sitting in the car, the poor man. Oh, stop. And I asked him, who's Mo Molan? And he said, she's the Secretary of State above in the North. She, I says, and he turns around to me, he says, what a waste of a day this was. They didn't call me back, Tom. They didn't call me back.
And listen, Tomás, were you actually interested in joining the army?
I would have. I think I do like, I won't say I'm meticulous, but I would have been attracted to the lifestyle, Tom, I would say. Do you know, in terms of the organising of it, the fitness side of it, the
discipline of it.
Yeah, I would have. I don't think I had the personality at the time. Anybody I've ever met, I think the personality side of it is huge. I was a very shy young lad when I was growing up. I don't think it actually suited me at the time. I don't know, it was a sport that gave me confidence as I kicked on, but I didn't have it certainly back then. Dara, who you'd know anyway, would have a better personality. Dara went to the second or third interview on it, but I never passed it. But I would have been attracted to the lifestyle. I was attracted to the way that they would have allowed you go through college to whatever course you wanted to do through UCG. So I was attracted to it, but I don't know how. I think my own personality at the time wouldn't have been suited to it, but I went down another road, and it was all towards football. Tom, it was everything was geared towards football, no matter what. Do you know? Would Hefo, can you talk to me about Hefo, his impact, and I suppose your experience of him? Because he was the man. Dublin, I suppose we all know Dublin as the team that have broken every single record, even back in '74 when they came along. I would have followed that, obviously, because of the connection of Paddy with it and all that. And they were the team that actually set in motion probably one of the best rivalries of all time, and why Kerry Dublin is still such a big deal. And I know they met in the 50s before it. but it was what Heffo did to Dublin. What did he have, Tom, or what was your experience of him with Dublin?
It would have been that era, Tomás, and the Heffo thing and the Miko thing that drove me into the dream of playing for Dublin and the whole Hill 16 thing. And again, my father, we used to go to Croke Park every Sunday and watch the Dubs. And so in 1985, I joined Ballymun Kickham's. And I was before that with Luke and Sarsfield, but when I finished up in college in UCG, came back, joined Ballymun Kickham's. I looked to join Vincent's because Heffa was there. And they kind of had an interview with me and they said, well, you're Tipperary, blah, blah, blah. We don't take country players. And they suggested to me that, I remember talking to a Buster Leaney who used to play with Dublin. And he was in the army, you see. So I went to the army, senior army officer. I said, I'd like to play with Vincent's. And he said, look, I'll see what I can do. And he came back and he said, look, a bit of bad news for you. He says, they're not going to take you. You're a country player. But we suggest you go to Kilmacud Crokes. And I was sitting in dinner one night in the mess and I was telling another communist. And I said, yeah, they're not letting me join Vincent's, blah, blah, blah. And he says, why don't you go out to Ballymun Kickham's there? He said they'd be delighted to have players. And he said, I'm out there, I'm involved as well. So that's how I got out to Ballymun Kickham's. We won a championship the very first year with John Kearns, Anto McCall, Jerry Harrigan, all those fellas, Declan Sheehan, Barney Rock. We had a great team. And then I got a call from Heffo and he said, we'd like to bring you in for a few games. And he did. And I remember my first day, Tomás, was playing a challenge game in St. Margaret's against Offaly, I think it was, and I could be wrong on that. But he threw me a number 11 jersey, and that was it. It was in motion after that then. So what did I find from him? He was relentless, and we talk about being ruthless in terms of his application. He had no time for anybody who wasn't 100% committed. No time. Like I was in college at the time, just to give you an idea, and stop me if I'm boring people or boring. No. I was in college at the time in Galway, and I went up to him, and I'd been called on the panel around February when they started back training or the second part of the league or whatever it was. And I said, look, I'm in college. I'm doing exams now in April, May. And he just said, that's fine, that's no problem, but we still expect you to be training. There's a Carnacoska game, he said, on Friday night against Galway. Dublin used to play Galway in an annual Carnacoska game. And he said, we're going to start you in it. So I spent 2 months, 3 times a week, travelling from Galway to Dublin. And I used to stop in Tullamore in an auntie of mine. And some nights I was just so tired, I had to stay there and drive on to Galway in the morning. Now, I was breaking the army rules as well because you weren't meant to be out of base while you were doing exams. Right. So you had all this tricking going on and pressure driving, and the roads weren't as good as they are now. But he would not relent on that. You had to be there. If you wanted to be there, everything else took a second place. So that's the first thing that he brought to it. And then Tomás, like some of these guys, what they have done, a charisma builds up around them. And he had a charisma. So if Heffo said you do something, you did it. Yeah. And very direct as well. It'd be a kind of a case of, can you mark so-and-so? If you can't, fine, tell me, we'll get somebody else to do it. So it was very manly. You had to be quite manly, if you know what I mean. It was alpha male stuff. There was very little arm around the shoulder. But he in other ways then, he was really, really good because he'd come to me and he'd say, and now I know you've few expenses, and this was before expenses were. He says, you tell me what it's costing you now and I'll get you sorted. And he would get you sorted. Yeah. So he would look after you in terms like that. But for looking after you, you gave 100%. Yeah. And he just had that aura about him. He was Heffo. That was it. He was just a god in Dublin. The same way as Miko would be in Kerry, I'm sure.
Exactly, yeah. And the two of them egged each other on in terms of like Dublin came in 74, Kerry came in 75. Geez, that's 6 or 7 years. How was he in the dressing room, Tom, in terms of, was he fire and brimstone or was he more measured?
Very measured, but very measured, but had a tone which was fire and brimstone without shouting, if you know what I mean, and would look straight at you to tell you something. It wouldn't be, he wouldn't be kind of turning, or it'd be straight at you and tell you exactly what it was. And the thing about Miko and Heffo, I think, and I'd only a year with Heffo, I think the thing about Miko and Heffo is, I think Miko embodied everything about country teams. And then Kerry embodies everything about the country, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Heffo embodied everything about the cocky dub, and everything that the Dublin GAA was. Yeah. So you had two icons here who embodied everything about the city and the country in as parallel way as you could possibly get. And then the teams responded accordingly. Like when I think of some of the players, the Brian Mullins and the David Hickeys and all those guys and Mikey Sheehy, and they were seriously, how would I call them? And I think teams that I played on with Dublin suffered. They were seriously mature teams. They were really mature footballers. They knew their football so well. They could perform so well all the time. And then you have to think about it. There was very little coaching in terms of how you perform. And it was more kind of, you're a halfback, now do a halfback's job. You had to kind of figure it out yourself, a lot of it. Yeah. Those teams, they were incredibly mature individuals and professional and smart individuals who just got it right nearly every day, and there was nothing between them.
Looking back, and it was a time when I was growing up, so I used to follow it, and I remember it. When ye were started going well, and around the early 90s, call it lucky or unlucky, but the teams from the north, Donegal came, Down came, Derry came, ye were caught in the middle of this, and ye did overturn it in 95. But in the early 90s, did you ever think, Jesus Christ, this is not going to happen? This is
Tomás, I was going to correct you at the beginning. I was gone in 95. So I
gone in 95?
Gone in 95.
Fuck.
So I spent, and one of the reasons I went at the end of 94, one of the reasons I went was just exactly what you said there. I got tired of it. It wore me down. The constant losses wore me down. And I don't mind saying that. I started in 85. I was beaten in an All-Ireland final. 86, 87 and 88, we lost Leinster finals. 89, I remember the league in 89, we started an unmerciful row down in Avon against Meath. And we kind of, and it was all hell broke loose. And then a few months later, we beat them in the championship. Having done that, I think, having kind of said, right, let's stand up here now and be counted for once and for all. Yeah. So we followed it then in 89. And then Keith Barr, was it Keith, got sent off? Yeah, I'll say Dinny Allen got him sent off in the 89 semi-final. 90 we were beaten again. And then we had the 91, 4 in a row, which went on for...
That was the saga, that was unreal.
Yeah, that was an incredible time. 92, I was captain, we were beaten. And 93, we were beaten by Derry, and I got a suspension after a league final for an altercation with Brian Murray. And then in 94, All-Ireland final, beaten again. And at that stage, I just said, I can't do this anymore.
Could you have gone on, Tom? Could you have easily pushed the body again?
Yeah, I suppose, is that asking me the question, are you sorry you didn't stay? Of course.
Yeah.
I think I had fallen out of favour with Pat O'Neill and Fran Ryder and co. I was probably, being honest, Tomás, I was probably a little bit difficult to manage because I was getting irritable.
That happens when you get that little bit older, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Irritable and frustrated. And I don't want to, criticize anybody, but I was a bit frustrated with my own teammates as well, that I didn't think we as a team were functioning or achieving as much as we could achieve for whatever reason. And I think because I felt we weren't fully committed enough. Now I know I'm excessive, and you probably think, I don't know what you think, but or why I was asked on here, but people would have the view that I was totally obsessive and etc. etc. I was to an extent. And I expected everybody else to be as obsessive and everybody else to be as driven. And that's not the way the world works. Everybody doesn't think like Tomás Ó'Sé and everybody doesn't think like Tom Carr. So it took me a while to understand that. So I think I ended up getting really frustrated. And I didn't want to be that person.
I'm enjoying the chat, Tom. I love talking proper football talk, and this is, you can't get better than this. I'd like to mention Airgrid. They are the official timing partner of GA, and they obviously sponsor the show, so Gurmila Mahagivsha. Tom, can I ask you, how did you get involved? Because I'd say our personalities are similar in a way that, because everybody would have had this idea that Paddy was a joker and Paddy was a messer, and I've never met anybody who'd take football as serious as he did. And when obviously they had a different kind of they didn't really take the National League as seriously, and when he tuned in, I never saw anybody taking it as serious. So did you find it in management then? Let's say if you had high standards and you expected lads to put in what you would have put in and what you think that they should be putting in, did you find it as management throughout your career frustrating at times then?
Yeah, I did. Being honest, I did. Very frustrating. In fact, I couldn't understand it. And when I think back now, Tomás, I went into management too early. I'd have been better off waiting for 10 or 15 years because I needed to remove myself from that and understand that, coaching and management isn't the same as being a player. I'm a good man to bang the table and to give a halftime tea talk and to do all that sort of stuff. No problem, because I have the passion for it. Yeah. It's not because I'm good at it. It's because I have the passion for it and I'm fired up for it. So, but that isn't always the way. As I've learned, that's not how it works. And would I be? And I'm very clear. I'm very clear that at the end of the day, 80-90% of it is hard work. Like you take the top 6, 8, 10 teams. Of course, the confidence and the belief thing and all that. But so much of that, you have to work at that as well. So much of it is the hard work. And if you're not prepared to do it, you're not going to achieve. And Tomás, I would have done anything. I would have done anything to win matches. I would have done anything for Dublin, managing them, playing them. Didn't bother me. And I did do anything. And for that, I'd expect others to do the same. And I think that's why some of the teams today are successful, because they're absolutely obsessive about it.
Yeah. Did you go straight into management, Tom?
More or less. I was there and finished in 94, 95. Mickey Whelan took over. I was in Parnell Park the day he was booed off the pitch. I thought it was a very sad situation. A man who had been an absolute Dublin legend as well. And then John Costello gave me a buzz. And he said, look, we need to steady the ship here a bit, etc., etc., etc. And I went back in and I managed a lot of the players that I played with. Now, that actually, from the army training, and not because I was barking out orders or anything like that, from the army training, I had a good grasp on, organisation and management and working with players. And it took me a year to kind of clean it out a bit. A lot of them some of them, not a lot, that's not fair. Some of them bought into me managing them and some didn't. Yeah. But we had to spend a year finding out before we could move on.
Did that time, I suppose, if you look at it, right, Dublin, Kerry,
Sorry, Tomás, do you mind me asking you something? Because if you don't mind, how did you, because I'm interested, how did you find the Offaly experience?
I learned an awful lot. I enjoyed it, right? But it wasn't, I wasn't the captain of the ship. And I was there to learn, but with a view, I would say, of getting involved further. But I did enjoy it. I learned an awful lot. I think I kind of understand the levels of commitment and how it can be different in other counties. Because there was stuff possibly accepted and allowed up in Offaly that wouldn't at all be allowed at home.
And okay, so
would I struggle with that? I would have if I was number one in terms of manager there. I would have struggled big time with that. I would have.
Yeah. Okay. So Tomás, and I don't know what your intentions are, but Tomás Ó'Sé in my book could pick nearly any team if he wanted to manage. So what is stopping you doing it now?
What I was talking about earlier on, I took on I actually had agreed. I agreed with Michael Duignan that I would go in as manager. I had actually started the process of looking for coaches, looking for selectors, looking for people within the county to get involved. So I had started that. In the meantime, a job in the school had come up, a principal's job. I'm in the same school since I started out in 2001. That came up, I got that, and then my fear, Tom, always is, and my attitude would be, if you're going to do something, do it to the best of your ability. And I didn't think that I would be able to do both to the best of my ability, especially with the travelling that was involved too often. And then I had spoken, and the lads at home in Kerry, and it was a bit of a mistake as well. Not a bit of a mistake, I won't say it was a mistake, but the lads at home, the second that they knew I wasn't getting involved with Offaly, they got me to get involved with the 20s. And I know it's a way less of a scene than the senior inter-county scene, but the commitment in terms of time and travel, it was just about less. The time, I suppose, was less in that kick off just after Christmas, whereas I presume senior inter-county teams go October and they start kicking on from there even before it. But I did learn an awful lot. I have been with a good few managers, Tom, and I look at how they deal with players, how they deal with situations, how they deal with half-time situations, switches on the sideline. I was kind of trying to sponge it up. I thought John Mahan had his strength was how personable he would be with players, and you always have to have that balance. But there was other areas that I'd look at Eamon Fitzmaurice, how he used to do things, or Paddy, how he used to do things, or Jack Connor. And that's all I had. Billy Morgan. It's not automatically that I go in thinking, I'm going to be a sponge because I want to learn how these fellas go. It wasn't. It was just, you'd see it and you'd just say, I take it. I never saw somebody like Billy Morgan. I never saw a fella that would speak, and players from whatever county, I saw him with UCC, from whatever county, Kerry fellas would still to this day lie on the road and let Billy Morgan drive a car over them if he wanted. You know? So I learned a good bit. I just saw, it was my first taste from a management side of inter-county. And I'd still be asking and probing, Tom, because I think the step up from under 20, we'd say, to senior is massive. It is massive. Even if it's, I think half the stuff, is it needed? Is it necessary? I'm not sure. But I learned an awful lot above there. But it's different. I think I think Paul Galvin spoke about it when he struggled with Wexford. Your expectations are different. What you consider normal is not normal in other counties. Do you know? And that's where I kind of struggled at times, and there was decisions made, and I says, no, I wouldn't agree with that. No, I wouldn't give that fella that chance or opportunity for that. But I think other counties would find it easier to down tools and walk away.
But you see, Tomás, that's part of the problem, and that's the inequality in the GAA as well. It is the attributes required to manage, for Paul Galvin to manage Wexford, and the worst thing he could have done was come out of a Kerry setup and think that he'd go into Wexford and say, right, I'll replicate that here. Okay, I mightn't win in All-Ireland, but I'll get them up to Division 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I think that GAA has to address is the inequality in the counties. Because if you take the Leatrams and the Longfords and all, and I don't know how it's going to happen, and maybe the what you call a cup is a way of addressing it. I'm not so sure. Those counties, first of all, they're weak. Second of all, there are 5 or 6 players in all those counties who should be on the county panel playing for the counties, but they won't because there's no point. There's nothing to be won, waste of time. Whereas you compare that to Kerry, Dublin, They're killing each other to get on the Kerry panel. They're killing each other to get on the Dublin panel, etc., etc. So it's a double whammy for all these counties. And I don't think the GAA has done anything to address that whatsoever. And then the ones who have all the everything going for them in terms of getting the better players, they get the most money, the most sponsorship, the most, etc., etc., etc. So it's a major problem.
No matter what happens, Tom, no matter what happens, no matter what stages of football or the style of football or it all, eventually, if the style of football plays, the Dublins and the Kerrys will come around it anyway. Eventually, it'll come around, won't it? It's always close enough to the hierarchy the way it is, isn't it?
It always does. And, it's tradition and, it's sometimes really hard to explain. But then there are counties, Tomás, who have shown it can be done. When you think about Armagh, their first one there back 20 years ago, and you think about Tyrone and think about Derry, Down not so much because, we would have all associated with Down with winning All-Irelands, but not Armagh, not Tyrone. Yeah. So it can be done, but where they fall down is they take short-term views. They get in a manager for 2 years and they think it's going to happen. It'll all be turned on. They don't take long-term views. I remember, I can't think, was it 15, 20 years ago that Dublin came out and we are going to contest an All-Ireland Winner every 5 years. That's going to be our 20-year plan. And obviously that they did much better than that. And it's getting a county board to have a long-term view, but they're not able to because it's like politics. They get in, the chairman gets in for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, and he wants to leave his name in there rather than leave a legacy of football tradition.
Did you enjoy the last, and I'm not saying it's over in any way or whatever, but have you enjoyed the last 12 years? Have you basked have you enjoyed the Dubs the last 12 years?
No, I struggled.
Have you?
Yeah, struggled, to be honest. I don't go to games. I will watch every single game and which really closely because I'm able to watch it. When I wasn't working at them, Tomás, I wouldn't go to them. Because and it's fascinating. Don't ask me why. And I loved the Dubs. I loved Dublin. I had a great group with me for 4 years. I would do anything for them because they were so loyal to me. Desi Farrell and all those fellas. They were incredibly loyal to me, and I will always appreciate them for that. And we had a great 2 days in Thurles with Harte.
I was going to come to that, Tom.
Yeah. But Tomás, I do, because there's a bit of me still back there. And unless I can be, and I listened to Keith Wood one night on one of the news talk radios, and it was Keith Wood and somebody else on, and one of them said, no, I couldn't go to games. And I said, that's me. And then Keith Wood said, yeah, I love it. I'd be at every game. And I said, jeez, how could you be at every game that Leinster are playing or Ireland are playing? In this case, you, Kerry, in this case, me, Dublin, and be an outsider looking in and not being in the thick of it. I struggle with that. And that's being honest about it. I could say, oh, no, I had a great time and blah, blah, blah. I struggle with it all the time. Yeah,
I enjoy, and I'd be involved, I'd be working at a lot of games, but I do enjoy bringing the kids there. 2001, Tommy, and I know back then it wasn't like now in Leinster. You had to come out of Leinster. There was huge matches with Meath, obviously, at the time. That rivalry was absolutely massive at the time. In terms of atmosphere, in terms of opposition, in terms of, and I know eventually the result didn't go your way, was the Dublin Kerry game like anything you've ever experienced as a manager?
No, it wasn't. And it had got to, like we came in there under the radar a bit in terms of we were doing okay. We'd come out of a bad time. The playing group wasn't as strong as it was then the following 10 or 15 years. But by God, did we put in one hell of an effort? Did we plan? Did we do our video analysis? Did we go down the night before to the horse and jockey and stay and go into the pitch and walk around it? And I remember, Tomás, somebody said to me, we're on a bus coming from the horse and jockey into Thurles, into Semple Stadium. And somebody said, I can't think it was the first or the second game, probably the first game, and somebody said, "Oh, we'll go around there by the fisherman's pub or whatever it was, and we'll miss the crowd." And I said, "No, we won't." I said, "Straight up through the square," because it was humming with Dublin supporters. It was buzzing. I said, no, straight up through the square and nice and slowly. We went up through the square, and we were playing this song on the radio: "The higher you build your barrier, the stronger I become." And we'd a priest with us, Father Owen Tyne, who actually does a lot of work with Gerard Canning and the stats and that.
I know the lad. Yeah.
And we actually had mass in Holy Cross Abbey that morning as well. So this was getting bigger and bigger by the hour, if you know what I mean. And it kind of took on a life of its own. And I remember I think the game was delayed.
It was the first one.
Was it? Yeah. The game was delayed. There was traffic and this and that. And what a day. What an effort. What a game. What control I lost.
It was, but I think it was, if there was ever an advertisement, Galway, or not Galway, but Mayo played Kerry and Limerick. You have games sometimes that take on a life of their own. I was sent off the second day against Collymore. It was a reckless challenge altogether. But the first day, Tom, I was going to always at some stage ask, "What did you say to Morris when he was kicking that?" Now, to be fair, and people would say, I think it was one of the greatest kicks, because it wasn't as if it was the winner. If he didn't kick that, Kerry were out.
Oh, gone.
Gone.
The game was over.
Yeah.
And the funny thing, Tomás, Davy Byrne was in goal that day. He kicked it out over the sideline.
Yeah.
And Davy Byrne was a great guy, super guy, great keeper. But I had actually dropped Stephen Cluxton to put Davy Byrne back in.
Right.
Yeah. When I say drop him,
you're the only man that ever dropped him.
Yeah. I brought him onto the panel, you see. But and I said to him, "Stephen, look, Davy Byrne's a very experienced keeper, blah, blah, blah." And he said, no, Tom. He said, "Absolutely." He said, "I have no doubt that's what you should do." So it wasn't a kind of a dropping, we're dropping you, because he was actually very good for us, excellent for us, great young lad, super young lad. And would be as intense about it as you or I would be about football. And nearly, I remember having a conversation with him towards the end of my thing, and he was saying, "I don't know, can I do this?" And he sounded very like me when I was getting frustrated. I remember saying to him, "Stephen, it'll come right for you. Stick at it. Don't give up on it now. You're a young guy. Stay with it." But I haven't looked back at it, but people have shoved it in front of my face, so I've had to watch it. And I'm going to say this, whoever it was, if you see where the ball went out, Morris kicked it about another 10 or 15 yards further up the pitch. But you see, all that stuff used to go on then. I mean, the referees and the side were brutal at marking where the actual.
It can still be.
Still they're terrible. So you feel like roaring at them at times and saying, "Lads, that's not where the foul was. Would you wake up?" But anyway, they don't. And when I remember sidling up to Morris then and saying, because I know he wasn't getting on well with Paddy at the time. And they were a bit, because he wasn't being started all the time. Sure, he wasn't.
No, he came on as a sub that time as well.
He came on as a sub, and I remember I said, "Morris, don't make a hero out of Paddy." And that post. Everybody has asked me, what did I say? I said, "Morris, don't make a hero out of Paddy." And he fucking makes a hero out of Paddy, and himself, of course, into the bargain.
Well, it was iconic. It was only him that would have done it.
Absolutely. There's one or two players, I suppose Clifford would be capable of doing it. I tell you where else I saw it done, Tomás. We were here when I was with Roscommon. We were here in Cusick Park in Mullingar. We had played Offaly, drawn with them, extra time, replay, extra time, something like that. And I remember Frankie Dolan got a ball down on the stand side, and we were a point up, and the game was nearly up. I said, "Frankie, kill it." And he puts it over from the sideline. Now, probably a bit narrower than Thurles, but he puts it over from the sideline and he says, "Is that dead enough for you?" I said, "Frankie, kill it. Whatever you do, kill it." And he turned around to me with the cheeky grin and he says, "Is that dead enough for you?" And
it was great. Would you Tom, you'd have a great personality yourself, like the characters of the GA and down the years, the buddies you spoke about, the bond you had with that Dublin team, with the teams you manage. So you must have come across great characters along the way.
It's
Even the team you played on yourself, Heary and Barr and the boys.
mad. They were mad, stone mad. And I know they don't mind me saying that, but they love being mad. You know, Eamon Heary loved being mad. Keith Barr loved being mad. They were mad for action. They were rogues, but incredibly
good boys.
lovable rogues. Incredibly lovable rogues. Great guys, great characters. Mad for crack, and maybe a bit too much mad for crack at times, but that was just the way it was. But from that point of view, Tomás, I mean, we all love the GA. It's full of character. It's so pure. It's in there's so much honesty with it. They're so genuine, and I'm the GA's biggest critic, you know. And I often feel sometimes I got my suspension because I have a big mouth and I said what I felt and all that, and they got their opportunity to shut me up. So I was his biggest critic, but I'm its biggest admirer as well for what it has given me and my own two lads playing, and my daughter plays with Westmeath as well. It's a phenomenal organisation. It is a super network, but by God, does it frustrate at times, and by God, is there a lot of politics in it? There is, but you know what? We love it.
I think I'd agree 100%. I'd be giving out most of the time when I'm talking about it, but I'd absolutely love what it does and how it works and how it operates and what it gives to the communities, especially. I spoke with Niall Cahalan lately, and I'm not going to hold you much longer. And he has one of the unbelievable sporting families. All the children in some level are playing hurling, football, camogie with both teams. You mentioned Vicky there. Your son Simon, I found it fascinating, and I knew he was a tennis player, but I was reading today. I did a bit of Oberwelle. He turned pro at 15. Is that right?
That's correct.
That must have been very, very difficult, like in terms of where he was academically, in terms of school, in terms of, because I presume there's an awful lot of travel involved. It was a huge decision, was it?
I tell you, Tomás, and I won't bore you to death with it, but it was one of the great, for me and us as a family, one of the greatest insights into professional sport that you could see. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Had a conversation with his coach when he was 15, 16. He had won all the titles here, etc., 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 and just took to tennis. So if you ask me why, no special reason, took to tennis, was very good at it. And then the coach said, no, he's capable of doing it. But you had options then, you see, stay going to school, take a thing in America, take a scholarship in America. Yeah. And he did have one or two of the academies onto him, IMG, etc., to come. But we made a decision that, look, let's give this thing a go. You might never get the opportunity again. And so he began his professional career, because he went to all the junior Grand Slams and he ended up being top 50 in the world, number 47 in the world for that year, number one ranked player in Britain and Ireland for that year as well. So it all seemed rosy. But then the reality, Tomás, of professional sport bit the following year when he finished his junior tennis, and now you had to go into the big bad world of third level professional tennis, which is called the future circuit. Be a bit like the challengers in the golf. Okay. And then you had to go out to Egypt and Tunisia and Mexico and all these places, 35 weeks of the year you to be on the road to compete if you were going to make it through. So I went with him as often as possible. His coaches didn't really travel with him that much, didn't have the support mechanism around him. His injuries were tough luck, stuck in airports, flying from Mogadishu to Florida to any of these places. Shit food, beaten on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, pack your bag, move on. This is at 16, 17 years of age. And too much, too early, emotionally draining. And
even for the head.
Really lonely for a young fella. Really tough on the head, because you take everything so personal. It's down to you. There's nobody to blame. There's no teammates. There's nobody with an arm around
Yeah.
your shoulder.
There's no team kind of around you.
No, there's nothing. There's nothing, and you feel that, and it's like, you know, it's you learn as you live and you grow up. It's like the tradition thing. Like Ireland doesn't have a tradition of tennis players and competing at Grand Slams, so you're fighting that as well. You're fighting your tradition. You're trying to buck the system, and that can be, and you're trying to do it on your own. And then you were coming up against all these kids who had kids who had they had their physio with them, they had their daddies and mammies with them, they had their sponsors, and like, just for very quickly, in the UK, and he's friendly with the chap Jack Draper, very friendly with Jack Draper, who was actually beaten the other day in Wimbledon. But he, as a youngster, because he trained with him for a year, he would get 100 grand off the UK system, Wimbledon system. He'd get all his physios, his coaches would travel, and Simon, on the other hand, would get about 10 grand a year from Tennis Ireland, and that was it, type of thing. Away you go after that. So it's just such a struggle.
Financially, then, would have been very, very difficult to drive it on all year round then as well.
Well, they say if you want to be a professional tennis player, and warning to anybody who's listened to this, who they think they have, who their little Johnnies and Marys are going to be the next Novak Djokovic's and Roger Federer's. It takes 120 to 150 grand a year to float a youngster out, or a young girl out on the circuit to try and make it. So that's what they say it takes. And Tomás, even from that point of view, when we were raising funds initially, you know, it was the GAA people who were brilliant in golf classics and sponsorships, and, you know, they were super. You know, people I owe a lot to.
It was an array of sports, Tom, because your daughter Elizabeth is lifting in terms of athletics as well. Like, there's how you obviously, it wasn't, you go do athletics, you go do tennis. They obviously played all sorts of sports.
Yeah, everything. I played rugby. I went to the King's Hospital School. I went to a Protestant school, Protestant environment. So I would have played rugby. Had to play rugby in the King's Hospital. I used to sneak down then to Lucan after playing a rugby match on a Saturday to play a Gaelic football match. That's the way it was then, because the school didn't condone Gaelic football. And then I indoctrinated. I wanted them to have a love of sport. I didn't really care what they did. I wasn't kind of obsessed about Simon and Garrett being inter-county footballers. That didn't bother me. I tell you what I didn't want, Tomás. I didn't want them, like me, to be prisoners to football. I didn't want them to be in a football jail and do everything because of football, their career because of football, their social life because of football. And I actually admire some of the youngsters now, likes of Noel McCaffrey's young lad, and these guys who can say, no, you know what, I'm actually going to go off traveling for a year. Because I simply wouldn't have been able to do it. I would not been able to pull out of the Dublin football team to go a year. I wouldn't have been able to do it. And that's pretty sad when I look back and I think about it in my own past, that you were that sewn to it that you couldn't even do that. So I didn't want them to do that. So they all took up their own sports. And Vicky didn't play football until she was 12, 13. I went coaching with Westmeath, and she won her All-Ireland about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, intermediate. Elizabeth then was a runner, wasn't good enough as a runner, realised it, and then turned to triathlon. Just missed out on the Olympics because she was a little bit late, starting, to be honest, and was injured for a year as well. So I wanted them all, if they were doing something, to be good at it. And I didn't mind really what that was. And that's kind of the rule we apply to everything. If you're doing it, do it 100%.
Jesus, it's phenomenal, Tom, from Tipperary to Dublin, all your own, say, coaching journey, and then the children as well, and what they are achieving and will go on to achieve. Listen, I've really, really enjoyed the chat, Tom. I'd go on further. We'll hook up another time and we'll have another talk. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Thanks to Airgrid Coma. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. Airgrid are the official timing partner of the GAA. You can listen back on all this season's episodes across YouTube and all podcast platforms. So I hope you tune into this one. 'Tis a fascinating chat. I enjoy it. The time flies, Tom. I know the episode is good when the time flies. So hopefully, if Kerry and Galway get to a final, I say hopefully, you might travel up to the final, Tom, and watch it. No?
Good. We'll have a pint tomorrow. Score a meal mahagod.
Not a bother. Goramila, Tom. Goramila. Míle buchas d'Airgrid, or a hór an show. Is Airgrid co-40 if you do on Common Lucas Gael, I lech ama.